U.S. Special Forces raid Colombian safe haven, disrupting El Sombra's billion-dollar human trafficking empire. September 20th, 2025, 4 a.m., Serranía de la Macarena, Colombia. 5 M1A, 2 Abrams tanks, and 4 U.S. attack aircraft led an assault alongside 405 Special Forces troops on the secret fortress of Diego El Sombra Morales, one of the world's most feared human traffickers. Inside the compound, 623 prisoners were being held for sale in a deal worth nearly $420 million, guarded by 150 gunmen, 12 fortified watchtowers, and heavy weapons capable of firing more than 2 million rounds per hour. The battle began. Gatling guns roared, RPGs rained down through the jungle night, and the Americans advanced with relentless precision. Can Morales' empire of fear withstand this storm of steel? Can the U.S. military rescue the hostages before it's too late? This is more than just an operation. It's the day a billion-dollar empire built on human lives begins to crumble. And I'll tell you the truth. September 19th, 2025. Time, 4:42 p.m. An encrypted transmission cuts through the static inside a U.S. military command post in Bogotá. On the other end of the line is Petty Officer Mark Harris, a Navy specialist who has been living for months under a false identity inside one of the continent's darkest organizations, Diego El Sombra Morales' human trafficking empire. What he's delivering isn't a rumor, it's a blueprint for cruelty. For years, Morales hasn't been a gang, it's been an industrial-scale human trafficking machine. Internal U.S. estimates put the network's victims at 12,000 over the past decade. Forced into slavery, sold into prostitution, forced into labor camps, or armed and turned into law enforcement. Harris reports that the team preparing for tonight's smuggling operation has gathered 623 people captured in hideouts, shackled and classified as contraband. The buyers arriving this week are expected to transfer $420 million in cash and assets, the largest illicit transfer investigators have ever tracked in a single operation in the region. Harris's recording paints a chilling, bleak picture. A convoy of 14 black Toyota trucks, supply depots buried under tarps, and 12 fortified guard posts surrounded by heavy weapons, PKM machine guns and Gatling guns firing belt-fed bullets, guarded day and night. He named the routes through the Serranía de la Macarena, described an underground complex known locally as Finca La Sombra, and provided a schedule. Shipments would leave at 4:20 the next morning, under the dawn sky. Worse, the human details were grimmer. Harris whispered of families torn apart, mothers numbered, babies strapped with plastic bracelets, men forced into armed squads. He described an encrypted ledger listing buyers in 7 countries, bogus accounts and encrypted rendezvous points. The financial scale stunned everyone. Profits in a single night could fund criminal organizations for years. Silence fell over the last sentence. The room suddenly felt too small for the weight of what they knew. These were not anonymous numbers. They were real people. Their futures were being decided in that tent. A senior officer tapped the table and said simply, "We cannot let this continue." The orders were clear. Time was running out. As soon as Harris's signal ended, the command post exploded into a state of controlled urgency. U.S. Southern Command activated Task Force Aurora, a combined assault force of Navy SEALs, Army Special Forces, and armored units. Their mission: destroy Morales' fortress before dawn. The plan depended on precision. Satellite imagery confirmed that Finca La Sombra was no ordinary hideout. The complex, spread across nearly 14 acres of jungle, was fortified with 12 watchtowers and at least 10 armored vehicles patrolling day and night. Heat maps showed bunkers buried under 20 feet of reinforced concrete, a structure designed to withstand anything but war. Morales believed it was impregnable. The Americans responded with overwhelming force. 405 soldiers were assembled in 9 assault teams. Supporting them were 5 M1A 2 Abrams tanks, each weighing 68 tons, ready to penetrate the fence with 120mm smoothbore gunfire. High above, a quartet of attack aircraft would coordinate the assault: an AC-130J Spectre for sustained bombardment, an FA-18E Super Hornet for fast interception and precision strikes, and 2 additional tactical jets for escape and backup. Supporting eyes came from MQ-9 Reaper drones, feeding live images to command screens. The timeline was ruthless. At 4 a.m., the drones would neutralize the surrounding area by attacking communications networks. At 4:10 a.m., the Abrams tanks would enter the North Gate. At 4:15 a.m., synchronized assault teams would attack the warehouses and bunkers. Every move was calculated down to the second, yet the stakes were high. Analysts warned that the Gatling guns positioned around the perimeter could fire more than 2.1 million rounds per hour if left unchecked, more firepower than some nations' armies. One false move, one early alarm, and 623 hostages could be massacred before the rescue could begin. As the clock ticked past midnight, the weight of the mission sank in. This wasn't just an assault, it was a race against mass murder, and then, with a final confirmation, the order was given: go for the attack. The engines roared, and the jungle night prepared for a storm of steel. Drone footage shows a convoy preparing to move 623 hostages in the early hours of the morning. But the question remains: will the rescue come quickly enough, or will the victims be lost forever to human trafficking? 4 a.m., September 20th, 2025. The forest canopy shook as the first wave began. Above Serranía de la Macarena, the dawn was rent by the roar of its engines. MQ-9 drones swooped low, firing pinpoint rounds, obliterating the compound's radio towers in seconds. Sparks flew in the darkness. For the first time in years, Morales' fortress was blind and deafening. At 4:10 a.m., 5M, 1A, two Abrams tanks rolled forward like steel titans, each weighing 68 tons, their 120mm guns ready to fire. The North Gate collapsed with a bang, the blast sending debris 18 meters into the night. Behind them, 9 assault teams charged in. 405 soldiers, every step calculated, every move rehearsed. The defenders responded with fury. Morales' men rained bullets down from their watchtowers. 12 Gatling guns, each capable of firing 3,000 rounds a minute, roared. If left unchecked, they could fire more than 2.1 million rounds in an hour, enough to tear apart anything that moved. But the Americans had anticipated this storm. An AC-130J Spectre roared overhead, its 105mm howitzer roaring. One by one, the Gatling squads fell silent, flames devouring the steel. At the same time, an FA-18E Super Hornet skimmed through the tree line at nearly Mach 1, dropping precision bombs on the southern perimeter. 2 more tactical jets blocked the escape routes, tearing apart the semi-truck convoys before they could escape. By 4:20, the perimeter of the compound had collapsed. The U.S. Special Forces entered under cover of fire, blasting through the warehouse blocks with thermite explosives. The scene inside was shocking. 623 prisoners crammed into concrete cages and rooms, many dehydrated, shackled, some wearing numbered tags. Operators moved quickly, cutting ropes, guiding civilians into safe corridors. In the chaos, Morales' lieutenants tried to regroup. Nearly 150 armed guards tried to counterattack with AK-103s and RPG-7s. The firefight was fierce. An Abrams took a direct hit from an RPG, flames igniting its armor, but continued to push forward in retaliation. Within minutes, 47 defenders were dead, and more than 100 were forced to surrender, their weapons strewn across the bloody ground. The U.S. forces also paid a price. 6 were wounded, 3 critically. However, the mission continued, determined not to lose a single prisoner. Deep inside the compound, Morales himself retreated to a fortified bunker. But even the bunker was not out of reach. Infiltration teams used shaped charges to breach the blast doors, and thunder rumbled through the underground corridors. By 4:45 a.m., the battlefield was no longer his. Morales' empire of fear was crumbling before his eyes, and the Americans were closing in. If you thought the battle was fierce, wait until you see what investigators uncovered inside the ruins. Will the evidence expose an empire larger than anyone imagined? By 5 a.m., the gunshots had faded to an echo, replaced by the heavy tread of American special forces moving from room to room. The fortress Morales had once called impregnable was now a crime scene under floodlights. What they found inside stunned even seasoned veterans. In the main bunker, the steel door slid open, revealing a treasure trove. $312,400,000 in cash was stacked in vacuum-sealed bricks, packed in duffel bags and shipping crates. Alongside the money were more than 1,500 gold bars, each stamped with foreign insignia, evidence that the network was laundering money through multiple countries. Investigators also seized 2.7 tons of narcotics precursors, stockpiled for trafficking along with human lives. The sheer volume was staggering, with one trade alone worth more than the annual GDP of some small countries. The digital findings were even more shocking. Inside a subterranean server room, operators collected more than 400 encrypted hard drives and USB sticks, along with 27 satellite phones still connected to active buyers. The data exposed more than 300 black market transactions, spanning at least 7 countries, from West Africa to Eastern Europe. Each ledger entry was linked to offshore accounts moving hundreds of millions of dollars, involving shell companies and power brokers across the globe. But the most damning evidence came from a secret ledger that Harris had identified before the raid. Scrawled in Spanish and Portuguese, the ledger listed 623 hostages scheduled for sale that night, sorted by age, gender, and market value. Children, even those as young as 9, were marked with dollar amounts next to their names. For the Americans who read the ledger, the reality was terrifying. Human beings treated with the cold logic of a commodities exchange. The captured lieutenants also helped clarify the matter. Interrogations confirmed that Morales' empire generated more than $1.2 billion a year through drug trafficking alone, money that went into weapons, mercenaries, and bribes. This was more than a cartel. It was a shadow economy, operating as if it were an independent nation. As the first light of dawn crept over the jungle, the fortress lay in ruins, but its secrets were now revealed. Trucks rolled by carrying cash, gold, and crates of confiscated evidence. Drones swept through the rubble while rescued civilians were airlifted to safety. The operation had not only crippled Morales' base, it had ripped through the hidden veins of a global empire. The question was no longer whether the United States would strike a blow, but how far the shockwaves would spread. By sunrise on September 20th, 2025, the ruins of Finca La Sombra were no longer just a battlefield. They were the foundation of a global case. Shackled and flown under heavy guard, Diego El Sombra Morales was delivered to a U.S. military detention center, charged with human trafficking, conspiracy, and cross-border racketeering. The evidence against him was overwhelming. More than 400 digital drives, $312 million in cash, and ledgers cataloging the sale of 623 human beings. But Morales' arrest was only the beginning. Within hours, international arrest warrants were issued for 47 of his foreign collaborators, bankers, brokers, and customers identified in the recovered files. Financial investigators froze over $860 million spread across 118 offshore accounts, crippling the financial arteries that had fueled Morales' empire. Entire networks that once moved invisibly through ports and airports suddenly found themselves exposed, hunted, and dismantled. The political shockwaves were immediate. At least 7 countries faced scrutiny as names of officials and businessmen surfaced in the documents. Some had profited quietly from Morales' shadow economy. Others had turned a blind eye. The revelations forced governments to confront uncomfortable truths. This was not just a Colombian crisis, but a global market in human lives. Diplomatic cables buzzed with urgency as U.S. allies prepared joint task forces to track down the surviving strands of the cartel. For the victims, the scale of rescue was unprecedented. 623 people were liberated that night. But intelligence suggested Morales' network had trafficked more than 12,000 over the past decade. The Pentagon pledged medical care, psychological support, and resettlement programs, while NGOs mobilized to reunite families torn apart by years of disappearance. Many survivors wept as helicopters lifted them out of the jungle, clutching U.S. flags handed to them by the soldiers who saved them. The broader consequences were undeniable. The seizure of gold, narcotics, and cash represented one of the largest criminal takedowns in U.S. history. A blow valued at nearly $1.5 billion. It disrupted a supply chain that had treated humans as cargo and revealed a system operating with the cold efficiency of a multinational corporation. For Morales' empire, the myth of invincibility was shattered. And yet, even in victory, commanders reminded their troops, this was a single battle in a longer war. Human trafficking, they warned, was not confined to one jungle fortress. It thrived in the shadows of every continent. As the first press conference convened in Washington, one phrase captured the moment. A fortress has fallen, but justice demands we dismantle the entire network. The world had seen the cost in numbers, in money, in lives, and it could no longer look away. As dawn spread across the Colombian jungle, the ruins of Finca La Sombra stood as more than a battlefield. They were a monument to justice. For decades, Diego El Sombra Morales had thrived in darkness, trafficking human lives with ruthless precision, hiding behind guns, money, and fear. But on September 20th, 2025, that empire collapsed under the weight of truth and force. The numbers still shock the conscience. 623 captives rescued, $312 million in cash seized, 1,500 gold bars recovered, and a financial network worth nearly $1.5 billion dismantled in one night. Behind those numbers were faces. Children who had been tagged for sale, families ripped apart, men and women stripped of dignity. Their liberation was more than a military success. It was a reminder that America's fight is not just against weapons or drugs, but against those who profit from human misery. The arrest of Morales sent shockwaves through courtrooms and capitals across the world. Allies pledged cooperation, governments scrambled to explain names found in ledgers, and for once, victims had a chance to reclaim their voices. Yet commanders on the ground knew the truth. One fortress had fallen, but thousands more shadows remain. This story is not just about Colombia. It is about a hidden global economy of trafficking, one that touches borders, banks, and back alleys everywhere. And it is about the courage of those who choose to resist it. From undercover soldiers risking their lives to ordinary citizens demanding justice. If you believe these stories matter, if you believe the world must see both the horror and the hope, then join us. Subscribe to this channel, share these truths, and help shine a light into the darkest corners. Together, we ensure that silence is never the last word, and that justice always has the final say.